The wire transfer hit my phone at exactly 9:17 a.m. $700,000. No emojis, no message, just a number so large it felt unreal, like someone accidentally typed too many zeros. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hand, while my lawyer sat across from me, pretending not to watch my reaction. "Once you sign," he said carefully, "you disappear, no contact, no explanations, clean break." Clean. That word almost made me laugh. There is nothing clean about being erased from your own life. I was 32 years old, married for 11 years, and apparently worth exactly $700,000 to be forgotten. The divorce papers were already on the table. My name spelled correctly, his signature already there. Of course it was. He always liked to finish things before I even knew they were ending. I picked up the pen and my hand didn't shake, not because I was brave, but because I was empty. 3 weeks earlier, I had found out about her. Not from him, from a waiter who mistook me for the other wife and congratulated me on the twins. Twins. I remember smiling politely, like the kind of woman who doesn't make scenes in public, then locking myself in the bathroom and throwing up until my throat burned. My husband didn't deny it when I confronted him. He just sighed, like I had asked something inconvenient. "She's pregnant," he said. "It complicates things." That was the moment I understood something terrifying. I was no longer a wife. I was a problem. So when his family's attorney called and said they were willing to help me start over, I already knew what that meant. Money in exchange for silence. Freedom in exchange for disappearance. I signed. No tears. No dramatic pause. The pen scratched across the page, and just like that, 11 years were reduced to ink. That same night, I booked a one-way ticket out of the country. Paris, not because it was romantic, because it was far enough that no one would expect me to go there alone. I told no one. I packed one suitcase. I left behind my wedding dress, my photo albums, even my favorite mug, the one that said "Forever starts here." Irony is cruel like that. On the plane, somewhere over the Atlantic, I felt something strange. A tightness in my chest. A dizziness I couldn't explain. I blamed the wine, the stress, the fact that my entire identity had just been purchased and shelved. When the flight attendant asked if I was okay, I nodded. I was very good at pretending. Paris welcomed me with rain. I checked into a small hotel near the river, the kind of place meant for people who want to be alone without anyone asking why. For 3 days I slept. On the 4th morning, I woke up nauseous. Violently. I barely made it to the bathroom. I knelt on the cold tile floor, breathing hard, one hand pressed against my stomach, and that's when the thought hit me. Not fear, not hope, recognition. I bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy where no one knew my name. I remember the cashier wishing me a good day. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept moving while mine had stopped. Back in the hotel bathroom, I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the box like it might explode. $700,000. Disappear. Sign the divorce. Start over. The test turned positive in less than 10 seconds. I didn't cry. I laughed. Not softly. Not politely. I laughed like someone who had just realized the story wasn't over. It had only changed genres. Because the man who paid to erase me had no idea. No idea that I was carrying the one thing money couldn't silence. And in that moment, standing alone in a foreign city with rain tapping against the window, I made a decision. I wasn't disappearing. I was repositioning. He thought he had won. That's the part people like him always get wrong. Back in the States, my ex-husband was already rewriting history, telling friends the divorce was mutual, telling his family I had needed space, telling her that I had quietly accepted reality and walked away with dignity. He even told people I was grateful. Grateful, as if $700,000 could buy gratitude for betrayal. His family moved fast, they always did. The wedding venue was upgraded, the guest list rewritten, my name erased from conversations like it had never belonged there. And her God, she was glowing. Pregnant with twins, publicly cherished, protected. Everything I was supposed to be replaced with. What none of them knew was that disappearance gives you a strange kind of power. When no one is watching you, you can watch everyone else. From my small Paris apartment, I started paying attention, not emotionally, but strategically. I read financial reports. I followed social patterns. I watched the way money moved in their world. And that's when I noticed something off. The payment, $700,000, isn't generosity, it's panic. People don't overpay unless they're afraid of something. So I did what I had never done in my marriage. I asked questions. The first crack appeared in a legal forum, an obscure discussion about inheritance disputes involving unborn children. The second came from an anonymous article about a private biotech investment my ex's family had quietly poured millions into. The third was personal, a message request. From her. I stared at her name on the screen for a full minute before opening it. I don't know why I'm writing you. I feel like something's wrong. I almost deleted it. Almost. Instead, I replied with one sentence. Trust your instincts. They're trying to control more than you think. She didn't respond right away, but she read it. The next message came 2 days later. Longer, messier, honest in the way only fear allows. She told me about the non-disclosure agreements, the doctors chosen for her, the tests she wasn't allowed to see directly. They say it's normal, she wrote, but they never let me keep copies. That's when the puzzle pieces locked into place. The test results, the ones that had arrived while planning the wedding. The line I remembered from a headline I'd once scrolled past without understanding. Genetic markers, inheritance risks, outcomes that could cost families billions. Suddenly, the money made sense. They didn't pay me to disappear because I was inconvenient. They paid me because I was uncontrollable. I hadn't been tested yet. I was a variable. And variables terrify people who live on spreadsheets and projections. I booked an appointment with a private clinic the next morning. No names. Cash only. When the doctor confirmed my pregnancy, he paused longer than necessary while reviewing the ultrasound. There's something else we should test for, he said carefully. My stomach dropped. 2 weeks later, the results came back. I read them sitting alone at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the paper like it was mocking me. The child I was carrying carried something rare, something valuable, something my ex-husband's family had spent years trying and failing to engineer. And suddenly, I understood the real story. The twins weren't the future. Mine was. They hadn't paid me to leave because they didn't want me. They paid me to leave because they couldn't afford for me to stay. I closed my laptop, placed my hand over my stomach, and smiled, not with bitterness but with clarity. For the first time since the wire transfer, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And the most dangerous part, they still thought I was gone. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in late spring. Of course it was. They wanted sunlight, white flowers, the kind of photographs that scream new beginnings while quietly burying everything that came before. From Paris, I watched the preparations unfold like a carefully staged performance. I shouldn't have cared, but when you've been replaced, curiosity becomes a kind of discipline. I didn't watch out of jealousy. I watched to understand timing. The invitations leaked online through a lifestyle blog, private estate, coastal view, guest list filled with politicians, investors, and people who smiled with their teeth, but never their eyes. Power loves weddings. They're excellent distractions. 3 days before the ceremony, her message came again. This time, it wasn't fear. It was suspicion. They moved the medical checkup. Again, and now they're saying the results were inconclusive. What does that even mean? I typed slowly. It means they're buying time. She didn't ask why. She already knew. That same night, I received something unexpected. An email. No name. No greeting. Just an attachment. A spreadsheet. I opened it and my breath caught. Trust funds. Contingency clauses. Inheritance pathways. And one column that made my skin go cold. Termination options, conditional. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about marriage. This was risk management. They were hedging their future, deciding which children were worth protecting and which were liabilities. I almost forwarded it to a journalist. Almost, but exposure without leverage is just noise. So I waited. The morning of the wedding, I woke up calm. That terrified me more than panic ever could. I wore a simple dress and walked along the river, watching tourists pose for photos, unaware that somewhere across the ocean, a family believed they were closing a chapter. At exactly 2:11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A live stream notification. I tapped it. She was walking down the aisle, radiant, smiling, surrounded by people who didn't know they were attending a transaction. My ex-husband looked relieved. Not in love, relieved. As if he'd survived a near miss. Then, right before the vows, I sent one message. To him, a single sentence. I hope you're ready to renegotiate. He read it. I saw his expression change in real time. Confusion first, then recognition, then fear. The officiant paused, sensing the shift. His phone buzzed again. This time, I attached a file. The genetic report. The one they never thought I'd have. The one that proved my child wasn't a liability, but an asset. A future they couldn't replicate. The ceremony didn't stop. It couldn't. Too many witnesses, too much money. But his hands were shaking. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked small. Her phone buzzed next. I hadn't planned that part. But fate has a sense of timing. She glanced down. Her smile faded. She didn't look at him. She looked at his mother. At the men in the front row. At the people who had been deciding her children's worth behind closed doors. And in that moment, I knew. The wedding would happen. But the marriage, that was already over. I closed the stream and turned my phone face down. Across the ocean, panic was blooming. Here, in the quiet of my apartment, I placed my hand over my stomach and whispered, "We're going to be just fine." Because the most dangerous truth had finally reached them. They no longer controlled the ending. The silence lasted 12 hours. That's how long it took for panic to exhaust denial. At 3:46 a.m. Paris time, my phone rang. No caller ID. I let it ring. Again. And again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. He didn't speak at first. He was breathing fast, uneven, like someone who had just run out of places to hide. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Not "how are you?" Not "are you okay?" Straight to negotiation. "I want what you paid me for," I said calmly, "to disappear." There was a pause. "That's not possible anymore," he said. Exactly. By morning, the wedding photos were everywhere. Champagne smiles, carefully cropped angles. But something was missing. Comments were turned off. That never happens unless someone is bleeding behind the curtain. By noon, the first leak hit. An anonymous source tipped off a financial blogger about irregular inheritance provisions tied to prenatal genetic screening. Dry words. Explosive meaning. Investors panic faster than families do. I watch stock tickers dip, then wobble, then slide. Not enough to collapse, but enough to scare. Enough to make board members start asking questions they had never dared to ask out loud. My ex-husband's mother called next. She didn't pretend. She never had. "You've made your point," she said. "This has gone far enough." I smiled. "No," I said, "now it's finally begun." She offered more money. More than before. A number that would have once made my knees weak. I didn't interrupt her. When she finished, I said, "I don't want cash." Silence. "I want guarantees," I continued. Public ones. Legal protections. Independent medical oversight. Trust structures that couldn't be quietly altered. Not just for my child. For all of them. Because power hates precedent. And I was about to set one. That afternoon, her story broke. Not the scandal. The doubt. A carefully worded interview about pressure. About consent. About autonomy. No accusations. Just questions. The most dangerous kind. The comments were turned back on. They exploded. By evening, my ex-husband's face was everywhere, but not the way he liked. Photos of him whispering during the ceremony. Screenshots of messages taken out of context. Speculation layered on speculation. And then something unexpected happened. She left. Not dramatically. No bags thrown. No statements. Just absence. And absence, when you're pregnant and powerful people are watching, becomes a statement all its own. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like nervous thoughts. I wasn't celebrating. I was waiting. Because endings are rarely loud. They're quiet agreements made under pressure. At 11:58 p.m., an email arrived. A draft agreement. Everything I asked for. Everything they swore they'd never give. I didn't sign it. Not yet. I closed my laptop and leaned back. One hand resting over my stomach. Somewhere across the ocean, a family that believed they owned outcomes was learning a new rule. You can't buy control from someone who has nothing left to lose. And I was just getting started. I signed the agreement at sunrise. Not because I trusted them. Because I wanted it on record. Once something exists in ink and law, it becomes heavier than money. Within hours, the story shifted. Not abruptly. Elegantly. A press release announced a restructuring of family governance. Medical oversight was reframed as modern transparency. Trust revisions were praised as forward-thinking. They tried to turn surrender into leadership. It almost worked. Almost. Then the second interview dropped. Not mine. Hers. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She simply described how decisions about her body had been discussed without her in the room. She named no villains. She didn't need to. By lunchtime, lawmakers were tweeting about ethical boundaries. Advocacy groups smelled blood. Sponsors quietly paused partnerships. The family's power wasn't collapsing. It was corroding. That evening, my ex-husband sent one last message. "You've destroyed everything." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "No, I just stopped you from destroying it quietly." He never answered. Weeks passed. I moved again, this time by choice. A small house, quiet street, doctors who looked me in the eye when they spoke. No NDAs, no intermediaries. Just truth, monitored by professionals who couldn't be bought. The birth was uncomplicated. The moment I held my child, the noise vanished. No headlines, no negotiations. Just weight and warmth, and a future that didn't require permission. Months later, a foundation was announced. Not by me. By them, focused on prenatal ethics, transparency, and maternal consent. They didn't credit me. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. One afternoon, while scrolling through old photos, I found a screenshot. The wire transfer, $700,000. The price of my silence. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of closure. Because disappearance was never the end of my story. It was the beginning of leverage, clarity, and choice. They thought they were paying me to vanish. What they actually did was fund the moment I stopped being afraid. And somewhere in that miscalculation, they lost control forever.